Welcome one and all to the show. My name is Donato and welcome to my channel, where today I'll be talking with professional coach and marathon runner Karl Welborn. Welcome to the show, Karl.
Hi Donato, how are you?
I'm very good, mate. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on our show to talk and share your knowledge and expertise, because as I mentioned, you're a professional coach and a top marathon runner, having ran a PB marathon of 2 hours 23, I understand. Yeah, 2 hours 23 and 1 second.
And 1 second.
Which is incredible. And also last year in the London Marathon Virtual, you came 5th overall. So pretty fast man, yes?
I'm sure there's plenty of room for improvement.
Exactly. So yes, in terms of, before I get into the details and the whys and wherefores and so on, in terms of what we're going to talk about, how can people find you on the social media and interwebs?
I guess it's just Instagram, and it's the K_Welborn, WELBORN.
RN. I'll leave a link in the description below, but yeah, I've got to say a big thank you, Karl. One of the reasons I wanted to get you onto the show is a big thank you to you and your time, because you're the man that put together the training plan for me for that 10K, that epic 10K at Goodwood back in December. It seems like years ago, but it was literally only just over 4 weeks ago. Because it was early December and it's the first time I've ever ran a sub 38, and it was thanks to the plan that you put together. Yes, I know you'd probably say, well, I had to put the work in myself, but it's great to know that it's the plan and you put that together, you put the training together. So what we wanted to talk about is some parts within that plan and how people who are watching this and may want to include some of these into their training to help with their speed, endurance, strength, and all that type of stuff. Because I do recall, for me being a marathon man, I've never done any specific 10K training, so a lot of this was very new to me. So, you know, we'll talk about some of the phrases like threshold training, fartleks, easy runs. I mean, for you, Karl, what are the key essentials when it comes to whether it is specific for 10K or it can be used for other distances as well, whether it be 5K, half marathons, but what are the key type training sessions that you normally put together for people in their plans?
Yeah, I think in the simplest form, the sport of running is just that. It's simple. It's relatively easy to do. We just need to run. The complexities, I guess, come in when we decide on what race we'd like to target, what times we aspire to run, and actually creating a routine that fits into lifestyle amongst everything else going on. We need to make sure that we aren't doing too much, that we're not doing too little, that we're going to be able to squeeze the best out of training and fitness.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's one particular session or one within the body that we need to work on in isolation. I think it's a mixture of everything. I think it's multifaceted, but it needs to be simple and it needs to work. And I think the first thing is know what you're training for.
Yeah,
that's important. So for you, it was easy. You wanted to run 10 kilometers, so your training was specific. It was specific for your goal of achieving this sub 38 minute 10K. So that was what all the focus was on. But what came along with that was an array of sessions, a structure, the relationship we built as coach athlete over that period of time. Yeah, I don't think it's one session. I think it's getting the right sessions for the actual goal and the timing of when you do things.
Because I found for me, there was things that I was doing that I hadn't done for many years, and obviously with the age that I'm getting to, one of the concerns I was I over egging it or overdoing it? And I do recall one session, especially the very first speed session, where I recall, because obviously we were in constant contact of what I was doing and how it was progressing. But I remember the following day after my first ever speed session, and I couldn't really get out of bed. My joints and everything was just aching. I thought, my God, I am really an old man now. And I think, and it's interesting you were smiling, because we did have a bit of a giggle about it, and I thought, oh no, am I not made for this kind of speed? Am I really should be concentrating more on the easy runs and just look on the endurance and go back to marathon? But the good news is when I'd done my second speed sessions, there was no aching, no anything. So it's almost like my body had a bit of a shot to the system. And I mean, how do you explain that, Karl, in terms of what our bodies go through? Because some people may be thinking, oh, we often hear you need to listen to your body, and I always definitely listen to my body. I definitely didn't push it too hard. In fact, I don't think I was able to hit all the paces that you'd set on the plan, but I was certainly gunning for it. How would you explain that? Because I think one of the things you might say, oh, it might be the shoes, because I was running in very minimalist type shoes, none of these high platform, spongy, carbon plated ones that we have now. It was just a very minimalist, basic, the Saucony Fast Twitch. And again, it was the first time I ran in those shoes. What was going on in my body? Is it, is there physics, biology, things that are going on?
Well, yeah, I mean, you were obviously sore for a reason. The reason would have been you'd stressed your body, you'd stressed your muscles, you'd done the speed session. As you say, your body hadn't been doing those sorts of sessions at all. You've not done those for years and years. You wore a pair of trainers that you'd never wore before. So, your body needs to adjust to the posturing that it's in when you're landing. So there's probably a few factors. But most of all, the fact that your muscles were working hard to achieve speed, and you've been doing that.
The need for speed. Oh, I do love the speed.
Yeah, you mentioned actually, I guess when somebody's training for an event, there is a fine line, I guess, between the right amount of work you need to do and not get injured, but get fit and be able to continue and stay consistent within that training cycle to get to the taper, to bring the body down so you freshen up and then you can race. And it is a fine line, and I'm not perfect. I myself have put myself in positions where I've been injured, been ready for a race. So yeah, and another thing is when you're coaching, it takes time to understand the athlete. So we only had a very, very short period of to achieve what you achieved. And you achieved that not because of 4 weeks of training I put together. You achieved that because of which we can talk about, but stuff that I assumed was already in place to put the plan for you as we did.
Yeah. There was certainly a lot in there, as you said. Those, yes, I think for me, all I had was a particular date, and it was a particular Sunday, because obviously with the lockdown started at a certain date. I worked out 4 weeks, and I basically downloaded a basic Runner's World 4-week training plan for a 10K, and it looked quite reasonable to me. So, but when you offered your services to do that and make it more personal, I thought, well, I can't really turn that down, such a kind offer. And looking at it, it did sort of scare me, but I knew that all I had was a date in Sunday, and each time I have a training session, all my mind was just on that session and nothing else. And I mean, you're saying about what was going on, or things that you'd assumed about me, or what I'd prepped and was ready for, because what were those things that you had taken in? Because I think for a novice looking at that plan, and I was turning to see where it was printed, but I didn't print it off. It is on my screen here, but there was things in there which a beginner, how can I put this in a nice way, if they tried doing that. You mentioned about injuries, and I don't know if you saw the BBC One programme about the indoor fitness, and one of the sections was about running. Apparently 50% of runners in a particular year will be injured, which I was quite shocked at how high that is. And I think for a lot of people, and I see a lot of beginners, especially now January, where they're very enthusiastic, very energized, and overdo it and get injured. So were there things that you mentioned? Do you want to touch on some of those things that you'd maybe assumed that I was ready for and had the?
I mean, you running a sub 38-minute 10K generally isn't something a beginner may be able to achieve. Some may be able to achieve that, don't get me wrong, but not everyone is going to be achieving a sub 38 as a beginner. So therefore, we know you're not a beginner. We know that you have trained for some time. We can watch all your YouTube videos to evidence how much you train. So that the one big assumption for me, thinking about the training and what you were going to do, was you just, well, come off a marathon maybe 2 or 3 weeks previous to this. So the biggest assumption was that you had invested in that marathon training and that you'd built a large aerobic base for that. Your capacity was good. Your ability to get good oxygen supply transported around your body to muscles was efficient. So we didn't need to build this aerobic base because all that foundation work was there. This was my assumption. I don't know how much you trained for your marathon, but you ran a good marathon, so you must have trained well. The conditions weren't great. So that was the first assumption. So really based on that assumption, the fact that you are a seasoned runner, you do train, you cross-train, you invest in your training, and you've got a good aerobic base, it really was then thinking, how close would you be to running sub 38? Obviously, I hadn't got anything other than your past results to go off. So I looked at your pair of 10, all your results on there, and realised you weren't that far away from being able to achieve it in the past, meaning your body's been there and it wasn't that long ago. So really it was about putting together some specific sessions. So we did there was quite a few fartleks sessions, base sessions, trying to improve your speed and your endurance through these fartlek sessions. There was some lactate, you mentioned lactate sessions, so we had a bit of lactate in there. We managed that pace for that sustained period of time. Hills, and we had a few. We had lots of easy runs, and what we did have is we had routine. So each week built on the week before. We could days as recovery days, but we added strides to get your body used to getting your legs used to moving quickly, turning the legs over nice and fast. We had 2 rest days. You were quite adamant about that. So we had Tuesdays and Fridays.
I do like my rest days. Yeah.
You like your rest days. So but it's important. And I think we added one day we did a double.
That's right. Wednesdays was a double,
which was a session day. So we just did the double. So the morning was very nice and gentle and easy to prime your body ready for the work that you were going to do later on that day. We then put a 5K into the plan. That was a last minute add. That was never the original intention, but we had the opportunity for you to do the 5K. And I figured that would be, or at least help me answer some of the questions of whether you were going to run this sub 38 or had the fitness to do it. We didn't take it, and you ran, was around 18, sub 18:30 maybe?
Yeah, it's under 18:30,
Yeah, and I think if you look at your equivalents of what you should be running 5K to run sub 38, it's around that 18:15, 18:20 marker. But we hadn't tapered for this, so therefore we can assume that you, on a fresh day in a race, you would have achieved and got closer to the 18-minute mark. So after that week, I was pretty confident you'd be able to do it. And then you had a few more sessions, and then we did some stuff where we worked at race pace. Well, you worked at race pace, not me. Watched. And then originally you were going to just do a time trial. And then we spoke, and I introduced you to a couple of guys who are coach, and you all together to actually do an official 10K race, because I felt that would give that extra edge. And I think you'd mentioned on ways to run faster. And one of the ways was to have a pacemaker, or even better, be in a race where you're going to be every step, really. And so you did it.
You definitely picked up on that. There was those things which, the pacer, whilst I didn't have a pacer, I mean, those who can go back and watch the full video, unfortunately, the person I was going to be running with, or close to, had gone off on the fronts on a different split. So, but yeah, when you're in an official type of race and you're running with other people, it keeps your competitive spirit there and things like that. But if we go through, what order should we go through in the reverse order that you'd mentioned those, in terms of the easy runs, the fartleks, and the fartleks, the easy runs, and the threshold, lactate threshold type thing. So in terms of the easy runs, 80-20, does that ring a bell? Is that what you work to? The majority of the training is easy runs.
Yeah, I didn't look at your plan and start working out if 80% was going to be easy and 20% was going to be hard, but it would have been around that figure.
Yeah.
Had 2 sessions, and then we had 2 rest days, and everything else was easy. And I was always quite adamant with you, which I think you're good at anyway, is keeping the pace properly easy, because we want to make sure that your body can adapt from the hard stuff. There's no point going out too hard on your easy days and then not being able to get the best out of your session days.
Yeah. So is the key reason for going slow on the slow sessions so that you can go fast on the fast sessions, or there are other benefits by going slow? I've heard things like it builds your mitochondria or endurance. What are the benefits of going slow, shall we say?
Well, one, you're not stressing your body too much. You can develop more mitochondria, which is important for when you're running, for the use of oxygen. Mm-hmm. The density of capillaries within muscles, there's evidence to suggest that keeping it nice and slow, you can increase that, so you can get more oxygen, therefore, to muscle. And there's some evidence around the brain being able to access motor units that aren't fatigued from sessions, so therefore they will access the unfatigued muscle fibers, which means there's no new connections from the brain to the muscle, which means when you come back to it, you can then access more motor units, thus, I guess, more power. So then, you can read about running slow and all of these advantages online, but rather than running and thinking, I'm doing this to my body, I'm doing that to my brain, I'm doing this to my blood cells. Just you're not stressing the body. The body's not being stressed, because that day is not a day to stress the body. It's a day to recover, to get these benefits, to adapt, so you're better for the next session.
Yeah. I'm glad you said that, Karl, because when you were talking about all those things, I was suddenly thinking, oh no, we're going to get a full professor scientific, about the neurons connecting and all the capillary action and all that. But you quite rightly said is when we're running, not to think about that. It's almost a case of trust the process and just do what's on the plan. And slow, I think you were saying, slow there's different kinds of slow for people, but if it's terms of minute miles, you're looking at like 8.5 minutes, 9-minute miles. And my understanding is the Kenyans run around 9-minute miles when they're going slow as well. Slow.
Enough for those top athletes to do that, then I know for me, it's definitely good enough. I've run this 2:23 marathon, and I think if you use these online conversion things, what would be your easy pace? My easy pace should be 6:15 minute miling if I was to follow some online which I don't do. But my easy pace, if you looked at the bulk of my Strava, my pace would be somewhere between 8:30 and 9-minute mile. What we on Friday? Wednesday morning, my run was 9:40 something minute mile for 30 minutes. That was nice and easy. It was nice. Like, I don't need to be worried about chasing like fitness on my easy days.
People might sort of think, and I think the trend is changing. Certainly for me, 5 years ago, if I'd even suggested this, I'd get a lot of hate messages from people, and often from these online training people who are following, as you just said, an easy pace is 6:15 or a certain heart rate or whatever. But when you're running at those paces, people sort of look at you think, well, to run fast, you've got to train fast. I think the tide is changing. People are beginning to wake up, when there's more books and more information. But sometimes for some people, there's almost no telling them until they keep getting injured. And then eventually they work out that they need to slow it down and recover.
And there's a few factors in that, because everyone's different, and you can't compare yourself, and I can't compare to a 18-year-old high school runner who can run fast every single day but recover. So there's a few variables to everyone's abilities, and I always remember a runner, a very good runner, saying you can't train like a tractor and race like a Ferrari, kind of insinuating and then race really fast. But what we're saying is, you're not going to be training slow 7 days a week for 4 months and then try and run something you've never done. It's about run easy when you have to run easy, but run really hard when you have to do that as well. So it's about back to that being specific. What's the goal? What's the target? And then how do we work out when we need to do the right things at the right times?
Yeah, I mean, I'm totally with you on that. As you mentioned, one of the days that you brought in was the double days. And I like that word that you had, primer. And we'll get onto the lactate threshold and fartleks. But the primer, to me, because when it said on the plan, just go out for 20 minutes, having done so much marathon training, I thought, well, what's the blooming point of just going out for 20 minutes? It seems pointless. But I quickly realized within the first 2 weeks that 20 minutes of, some people might call it jogging or going super slow, when it came to my afternoon session, where, as I mentioned, that first one, I think it was 1 mile at around 6:20 pace, or it was 1 mile repeats. That primer, and then I found the following Wednesday, it got me so pumped and ready. I still done the 2 mile warm up and the 2 mile cool down, but that speed session, I think people, when I was down in Arrow Valley in Redditch, they would just see me repeating up and down. So I was just going up and down this one path or a mile distance, and then recovering and then doing the mile back. That primer, it was almost invaluable, because I didn't think the muscles would have woken up or had some oxygen. So there's clearly a science there. But as you say, when I was running those reps, I think in total time of running it might have only been 20 minutes, 25 minutes, if that. And whereas the longer runs, long easy runs are like an hour and 10. For that 20 minutes, it was like full on bosh, bosh, bosh. And then the recovery, and then the following day was that easy run where it was recovering through. So would you say a recovery easy run the day after a speed session is essential, or is the cool down, the 2 mile cool down, enough and then ready for when you do one in 2 days? What would you say on that, Karl?
I think it's different for everyone. But my preference is, if I have an athlete, I would try them initially on the easy run the following day. But it really is very individual. And that's what I said earlier, that relationship between that kind of coach athlete, it pays dividends to know the athlete and what works well for them. Because some of it is a test. I don't have all the answers. I'm sure coach would say they have all the answers. Some of it is a test. That can be set really well for people. Some just won't. Some people will benefit from a longer, easier run the following day after a session. Some maybe a shorter, easier recovery run. Some maybe a rest day. The athlete, but ultimately you have to recover. So you're very good at this. You need to, the value you place on recovery has to be as great, or if not greater actually, than what you place your session.
Again, referring back to that BBC program, again, they did start bringing in things of science to help people recover quicker and all that type of stuff. But I won't go through the whole 1 hour what they were talking about. But in summary, the guy, the doctor, or professor, whoever it was, and the lady there basically summarised that just recover naturally, which is stay hydrated, good diet, and good sleep. So you do those three. So no magic drinks or any of that stuff. Is just simple, rest and recover. And that, as you said, I think experimental. It certainly worked for me. I was a bit concerned, especially some of the days where I was running like 3 days in a row, which I've not done for many, many years. At most, I would have 2 days in a row, but it was working. So, and I still do that routine now. So I'm still running on the Wednesdays, Thursdays, and then I do Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and then start again on the following Wednesday. So rest day on a Tuesday, and works for me. But you mentioned obviously doing those reps. What's the benefits? I'll touch on lactate threshold or threshold training. What's the benefits of doing that? What does it mean? Also, what is it?
Well, I guess when you're running lactate threshold, what you're doing is you're running your fastest pace you can without generating more lactic acid than the body can utilize and then reconvert back to energy. And that's when the race, you're really going for it, but your legs are screaming in pain because your body, your blood is full of lactic acid. So what is our lactate threshold sessions, or your lactate threshold sessions, are really looking at paces that I believed that you would be able to sustain for about 50, 60 minutes. You may not do 50, 60 minutes in total, but you do pace sort of work because you want to raise that threshold so you can sustain your paces for longer. And
So the purpose of those sessions is basically increasing the lactate, because all runners, and when we exercise, we produce lactate. We won't go into the biology of how it's produced and why it's there, but the bottom line is it is in our system. And as you were saying, just to clarify, is it's building up to a certain level. As we get faster, we then get to, as I say, I've filled my head, my threshold. When I go above that threshold, the body's starting to clear it. But if I'm going too high, then the legs become, in my phrase, it become like lead, and I can't really turn them over. Is that a good analogy?
Yeah, and I think actually, I remember years ago, I had a lactate threshold test in the labs.
Yeah.
And the person who did that, he spoke to me afterwards about Paula Radcliffe when she broke the world record. And I remember saying that they did graphs of VO2 max and lactate threshold. And interestingly, for Paula, and I don't know how true this is just what the man in the lab was telling me, was when she broke the world record, her VO2 max wasn't significantly higher. The thing that was higher for her was her lactate threshold, which through that marathon world record that she did at 2:15 for longer than she could before.
Right. So
in doing that threshold work.
So it's getting a combination of that. So I'm guessing, is it a tempo run? Is it the tempo run that takes you above threshold, or is it faster than tempo, or is it faster than 5K? What would you say is a good lactate pace speed?
I guess then that depends how you define what tempo means. I think people think of tempo as threshold. Some people tempo as a rhythm of what you're running, so that therefore would be interpreted as any pace whatsoever. So if you think of threshold, what could you run around 10 miles or half marathon at your fastest pace? Generally, that's where your lactate threshold pace would be.
Right. So it's half marathon.
Around half marathon, 10 miles, half marathon, around the hour-ish, around maybe. I think half to 10 miles. But generally, I personally think for me, it's around an hour. What could I run an hour?
Yeah.
I possibly could. What would my hour time?
I think I've seen that in many publications where it talks about an hour. I think obviously it's a round number, 60 minutes, 1 hour. People can digest that easily. So it's the pace that you can maintain for that 1 hour without losing any pace, but it's the maximum pace that you can maintain rather than an easy pace.
Yeah, and I think
We can all maintain an easy pace for 1 hour, but it's pushing it to a limit and hold it.
you could maintain for 1 hour. It's a
Yeah,
good.
yeah. What was quite amazing, you say about maintaining the pace, is when I looked at my splits for the 10K, apart from the last mile, every split was exactly the same, give or take a few seconds. Every kilometre splits was a few seconds. And the last mile was obviously, I didn't realise where that came. I just saw on yours, I had a mile to go, and I put my foot down and just went for it. And that was my fastest mile. So I guess that's where I clearly hadn't hit my lactate. My legs weren't led. It was tough and I could feel it burning, but it wasn't the kind of feeling where the legs just don't want to go and your brain doesn't want to move it or whatever. But which sort of brings me on to the word often, when I first saw it, obviously the little boys do giggle or whatever, fartlek.
Yeah.
Which it's a Scandinavian phrase, isn't it? I mean, it came. Explain a fartlek.
I think it means speed play with speed.
Yeah, yeah.
Which you did plenty of, and a lot of that was geared at working at this 10K effort.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we did that session together in Arrow Valley.
Yeah, yeah.
And I mean, it was rolling hills, but it was around going from your half marathon paced effort to your 10K pace in the middle down to your 5. And we were playing with speed throughout all of that 6 mile run.
Right, right.
And I think that's what helped develop some of your speed and endurance. So the ability for you to manage that speed. And obviously, you talk about your 10K, your pace, you clearly pace that to a T, which I should weeks of practicing it. So.
Yeah, it was just, it just felt everything, you know, people talk about being in the zone and, you know, talking with some of the guys, and obviously it's a credit to you, Carl. Sometimes you sort of, I was almost, because when we done that 5K run, you were pacing the whole group and we were all following you. I almost like pictured you there. I know you weren't physically there, but picture you pacing me. And yeah, there was people passing me and I was passing people, and there was lots of different races going on as well. So I was trying not to get confused that when I was passing people that they weren't the 10K runners, they were doing the half marathon and marathon distance. But obviously keeping an eye on those who were passing me, were they a 5K runner or were they a 10K runner, and trying to hold on. But I guess you've probably seen it many times where people talk about getting into the zone or in the flow, but I really did feel in the zone for that. And those progressive runs, certainly that one progressive run that we've done with yourself, as you say, half marathon pace for a certain amount of time, then 10K and then 5K. And I think you were filming me after that session, which I published on the old YouTubes, asking me how I felt and what was my favourite part. And I think it was the fastest one, which seemed bizarre, obviously having come from just marathon running, you know, no tapering for any half marathons, no tapering for any 10Ks, just going straight into them. It just felt refreshing. And even on some of the sessions where it was just pouring with rain and it was cold, it just felt great. You know, I'd finish it and I guess, is it a runner's high, or was I just an enthusiastic athlete? Or is it a combination of the two?
After the session?
Yeah, after the sessions.
It's called the Karl Welborn effect, when we run together in the rain. Obviously, you nailed the session. It was a big session. It was mid-training, which, you know, it was 6 miles of undulations. It wasn't.
Oh, those hills were brutal, some of them.
Both down, and it was all about that effort and that continual changing of effort. I think, apart from obviously you're getting fitter from it, it's for the mind. It's quite nice that you've got something to think about throughout the whole session. And I think coaching and helping athletes and helping friends, and one of the biggest things for me, I guess, I don't get too hung up on all of the science, which is strange because my background is sports science and I'm and do rehab, but actually it's about that mentality and the psychology of it. And I think if an athlete has done the training, the physical training, which generally putting together the physical training is quite simple to do, The bigger issue is about getting the athlete to believe in themselves, to believe in fitness, to believe in the process. And I think that's, for me, I have a coach, and the value for me to have that person to share my thoughts, my feelings, how things are going, and they can give me an objective opinion is invaluable. That's, for me, that the most important part of all of it is that the who can tell me how fit I am based on sessions when I'm doubting myself. So I have all of the same thoughts everyone else does. So for me, the coaching part is about getting my athletes to believe in themselves, believe in their fitness, to to really have the ability to push and be resilient because they believe. And that's the important part, is that you can have that relationship, and that develops over time, as we mentioned.
Yeah. So belief. I mean, I'm totally with you on that, Carl. From my background as well, obviously myself being an engineer scientist, I think a lot of people get bogged down in the detail and the science. And as you say, I think for a lot of people, for me, running is really simple. You just put some running shoes on and you go out the front door. That's it. I don't think there's any rocket science to it. Unfortunately, there's so much information out there. People get bogged down, and really, it's all just about enjoying it and having a love for it. And when you kept saying believe, I nearly broke into the Cher song. Do you believe? I won't sing that. Sorry, I nearly went into a riff there. I best not.
Only 20.
So yes. But the psychology is, I find, more important. And as you said, I've certainly found instances where people often say, and we often hear this, where they don't know where that came from. And I always, as I mentioned, ways of running faster, I think the crowd, the atmosphere, the other runners that you're there with, all contribute to it. I mean, certainly that 10K, I wasn't thinking of the sessions or anything. It was literally just being in that moment at that time. And yes, there was people panting or whatever. I think there was one lady who was pushing me quite away, and I think I was more pacing her rather than her pacing me. She was on my tail all the way around, until the last mile. And but it's those little things, and you see other people, you try and hang on their tail, but they're clearly of a different pace. But I think, as you mentioned, so those sessions, whether it be fartleks thresholds, is, as you've said, is find the balance that works for you, and see what works for you, and experiment. Would you say that's a good thing?
Yeah, definitely experiment. You need to test. You need to know what suits you. So you need to set an amount of time, and it might be 4 weeks, and you can try the schedules and see how your body responds, how it adapts, and see on trial a benchmark to kind of evaluate yourself against. So you can see the actual objective improvements, but you'll know inside if you are improving, if you're feeling good. I mean, it's difficult races now, but
It's funny you mentioned that. I mean, what I'd like to just quickly touch on, you mentioned obviously here in the UK we're all in the lockdown, and we're allowed out once a day. It sounds like some kind of I won't get into the politics, otherwise that's a completely different YouTube channel. But here in the UK, we're allowed out for our once a day exercise, and I think we can go shopping as well or whatever. But the one a day, and we can go running with one other person, socially distanced and whatever. But there's no races for however many months. What would be your tip or tips, Carl, for helping people to stay motivated and training? Or would you say just rest up and do easy runs, or what, time trials, virtual runs? There's a lot of these virtual races where you go running on your own around circles or around the houses. What would you recommend as a few key tips to stay motivated or keep going?
I think the main thing is that people need to do what they enjoy, what makes them happy, what's meaningful, serves a purpose. So for those of us who run, we continue to run because it helps us. and mentally it will help us.
Mhm.
But obviously, it will have physical benefits. And I think this whole virus, the one thing that you hear is how it affects people who are suffering with weight, like obesity.
Yeah.
So if we can invest in staying healthy and running and trying to take care of ourselves, then that surely must be a good thing.
Mhm.
And mental. And if you've got a friend or a group, there's groups on Facebook, and people have friends who run also. Staying in touch with those, you can set yourselves a challenge.
Mhm.
So my cousin is currently getting into running, and his goal is to be able to run a marathon. But he has all of January to be able to do it and just add up the miles. He's never ran before,
Yeah.
so that's his challenge. He's decided to try and do that for this month with a view to running longer term.
Yeah.
So yeah, but just keep everything simple. There's no pressure. There's no races that we know of that are happening. So yeah, just stay healthy, enjoy the running, and reach out to people, check in on other people.
Yeah, yeah. I think things like this, whilst we're talking here and this is being published on the YouTube, just having quick Skype calls, Zoom, whatever software people want to use, and if it's just a quick 5-minute chat with people, it does help quite a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah, and if you don't have that, then a diary and to reflect in and write how you're feeling.
Yeah, yeah.
Nice way to unpick the mind a little bit.
Keeping a journal. But I think the daily thing is in a way I try and look at the positives with the lockdown because they've got that ruling of you're allowed once a day. I do recall from the first lockdown in London that I saw considerably more people out walking, running, cycling on during lockdown. When they eased the lockdown and you could do whatever you wanted, there was considerably less out there. It was almost like people were being not forced, but their carrot to comply was going out to exercise, and I found that more. I certainly noticed a difference. I don't know if it was the same where you were, Carl, but I certainly saw that down in London where more people were exercising. As you say, it's good for the mental health,
Yeah,
good for all sorts of well-being.
lots more in the first lockdown. I think the weather played a big part in the UK
Yeah,
because cold and miserable and not
we
nice.
had gorgeous sunshine.
And very sunshine with the first lockdown, so I think there's more
Yeah,
people to go out. Um, but yeah, just trying to focus on what you can control and not really kind of get too hung up on everything that we can't control because
yeah,
that
yeah.
will go stir crazy. So yeah, work out what we can control and focus on that.
Absolutely, absolutely. So thank you so much for those tips, Carl. So basically, stay chilled, do what you can each day, and there's no pressure of any times wherever. So just if you want to join in with any virtual events, join in with that. If you don't want to, I know some people aren't into that. That's perfectly fine. I'm not really into virtual events. I like to do the real events. But I've very much enjoyed speaking with you, Carl, and thank you so much again for your tips, encouragement, and feedback. And if there was one thing, I would say that having a professional coach is worth more than the weight in gold, because we can sort of stab in the dark and have guesses and download standard stuff, but working with a professional, I believe is a tremendous help, not just with coaching, but also with other aspects. I think one of the things I looked at was having regular massages, physio type stuff to keep us going as well, rather than using Google or Facebook for any tips or information. I know people are well-meaning, but it's better speaking with qualified professionals like yourself. So thank you so much for your time, Carl, and I'm sure we'll be speaking again soon, whether it be on the YouTubes or just a great Zoom. But thank you again, and all the best to you and your family.
Sub 38, man. Well done.
Thank you so much, Carl. You take care. Bye bye.
Bye bye.